He was about to see Islam in all of its many forms.
Okay, now that. Okay, I actually look forward to seeing this. Part 2.
6. Iraq.
I
Ibn Battuta
just woke
sits,
up.
waiting for the ritual to begin. At the appointed hour,
was trying to figure out what do I react to now that I woke up. And then I realized, oh yeah, this series is actually quite good.
The Sufi mystics. When the afternoon prayers had been said, drums were beaten, and the brethren began to dance, he wrote. They had prepared loads of firewood, which they kindled into flame, and went into the midst of it dancing. Some of them rolled in the fire, others ate it in their mouths, until they finally extinguished it entirely. Some of them will take a large snake, and bite its head with their teeth, until they bit it clean through. This is it.
What the? We're like 30 seconds in, and this. Okay, this is already wild.
Ibn Battuta
Okay.
has never seen it, and it will make a lasting impression.
Certainly giving me an impression, I'll tell you that.
When Ibn Battuta was in Egypt, 2 separate holy men prophesied that he would travel far to the east and settle in India. And that made a certain amount of sense. The Sultan of Delhi was actively searching for scholars and judges to fill his bureaucracy, and paying them handsomely. So, when Ibn Battuta got done with his pilgrimage to Mecca, he decided to just keep going. Because not only was he seeing the world, he was making a profit doing it. You see, on his journey, he'd found that rulers often gave pilgrims lavish gifts, and a young Qadi got even more spectacular rewards. He'd heard that the further he got from the Islamic core of the Arabian Peninsula, the more generously a young scholar would be rewarded. Therefore, he made a vow to keep traveling, to see as much of the world as possible, and to never take the same route if he could avoid it. His eventual goal was India, but he might as well have some fun and make some money on his way there.
Swear, bro, all these travelers, bro, all these exploration people, it's always India. Is it just me? Or is it always just India? Oh, India. Yeah, India.
After all, he might spend the rest of his life in India and never get another chance to see this part of the world. So he began his gap year of travel, joining a Persian caravan and crossing out of Mamluk territory, trekking for 44 days into Mesopotamia, into the land of the Khans. A century before.
You know what's weird to me is how, like, he was doing this during the Mamluk era. Wasn't the Mamluk like an unstable kingdom, if I'm not mistaken? That's crazy. It honestly kind of gives a different perspective. Honestly, like, it's kind of neat to, like, you know, do reactions on stuff that's just not like war. You know what I mean? You know? Like, I don't know what happened there with my camera, but it turned off. That was weird. Oops. But yeah, like I was saying though, it is just nice to do stuff that's just not like war, like all the freaking time, man.
Mongols had swept into Persia and Iraq, devastating what were, until then, some of the most impressive and advanced cities of the Islamic world. And when Genghis Khan died, his empire split among his 4 descendants, leaving Persia under a Mongol ruler. But in the century since then, the Mongols had converted to Islam and were now patrons of religion and learning. Still, as Ibn Battuta passed through the once mighty city of Baghdad and ruined sites formerly renowned for beauty and scholarship, he reflected on the passing of empires. And he began to realize another thing. He was now truly abroad. His previous travels had taken him to new places, but this was different. As he left the Arabian Peninsula, he ventured into lands that were still religiously Muslim, but had underlying cultures increasingly divergent from his own. Many of the rulers and court figures out here, the people he associated with most, were relatively new converts, 2nd and 3rd generation Muslims, some even 1st. And their practices at times varied from what Ibn Battuta considered the norm. He was about to see Islam in all of its many forms.
Okay, now that. Okay, I actually look forward to seeing this.
Exploration began during his first encounter with Sufi mysticism, a sect that used trance, ritual movement, and chanting as a way to experience God's love on an emotional level, rather than the intellectual manner in which Ibn Battuta was accustomed. The same year, he got to meet the Il Khan himself, joining the royal caravan, traveling along the Silk Road to see the capital of Khanate. On the way, he visited with the Great Khan, seeing firsthand how the Mongol invaders had become assimilated into Persian culture. Far from a fierce steppe raider, this Khan was a just ruler, a handsome, observant Muslim who played the lute and composed poems in both Persian and Arabic. His kingdom was mighty and powerful. Ibn Battuta did not know it then, but when he next passed through 11 years later, the mighty Ilkhanate would be no more. Its ravaged landscape filled with warfare and death.
Yo, only in 11 years. Wow. Okay. Freaking, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying early in this video. Like, it's kind of crazy to me how he's passing through all these empires. And this is a very volatile period, you know? Medieval times, super volatile. Like, I mean, you know, it's kind of crazy. He's just living life, like, casually, whilst, like, empires are rising and falling quite fast, you know? So it really does go back to what I was saying.
Now, he bade the Sultan farewell and reached the Khan's capital, exploring its enclaves of Venetian, Genoese, Arab, and Chinese merchants before touring the Euphrates and then heading back to Baghdad. But it was time to get on to India.
I heard the Euphrates was drying up. I heard that the Bible said that the Euphrates was supposed to dry up in Revelations, and that the Euphrates is unironically actually drying up today. Euphrates River. That's interesting.
His gap year of religious tourism was coming to an end. But first, a side trip back to Mecca to make the Hajj pilgrimage again, because who knew if he'd ever get another chance? Yet that took longer than expected. He'd overextended himself a bit. In 1 year, Ibn Battuta had traveled 4,000 miles, and when he finally arrived back in Mecca, he was so exhausted and ill that after the Hajj, he took a full year to study, pray, and recover. But after that, it was off to Delhi. He went south to the Red Sea, traveling by ship until he was blown off course and became too seasick, so he had to continue his travels on land, often walking across the mountains of Yemen. But eventually, he made it to southern Arabia, where Muslim ports controlled the Indian Ocean trade, where he could get on another ship to India and settle down at a real job. But first, a side trip. I mean, because Africa was right there. And look, he might never get back this way again. So he jumped on a ship and went on a port-hopping tour of East Africa, visiting the Christian kingdom of Ethiopia, as well as the Muslim courts of Mogadishu, Mombasa.
Oh, wow. Did not know Islam went that deep. What was this? What is this? This is like, this is before, this is way before, colonization happened. Wow. Didn't know Islam was in Africa. Like, I know it was in, like, East Africa, but I didn't know it was in, like, Southeast Africa.
There, he saw how Muslim merchants had settled into the ports, converting locals and intermarrying into African families, their languages blending to create what we now know as Swahili. He saw the African section of the vast Indian Ocean trade, with merchants loading vast quantities of gold, ivory, spices, and perfume ingredients into their triangle-rigged ships, along with enslaved Africans captured from kingdoms further inland.
Yeah. You know, it's hilarious to me whenever I see like some like Muslim people, right? They go on my comments and they always like to they always point out the fact that blah 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 Christian Europeans went to Africa and took slaves and you know, and they used them in the Caribbean. Like, yeah, like everyone should know that. Like, no duh. But you know, it's funny because I can literally just use that logic and just kind of talk bad about Islam if I was really like cherry picking. I'm not like that, obviously, because, you know, like I said, I try to keep things at an objective level and objective facts. But like, yeah, I mean, in many Islamic countries, obviously, like, they have plenty of slaves. It don't really matter, to be honest. But in this case, you know, they have plenty of African slaves. Yeah, they have plenty of African slaves. You know, you don't see me going up to you freaking Islamic people and being like a Islamic black person, I should say, and being like, oh my gosh, you're kissing up to your Islamic, I don't even know, colonizers, masters, I don't even know. I don't know. Like, but you don't see me doing that. Because, oh no, in Islamic countries they had black slaves. Like, no, like, it's stupid. You just, like, freaking, I swear, every time someone goes in my comments, bro, I always points that out. Like, oh, Christians went and took slaves from Africa. A, they're probably not real Christians, let's be real. And B, like everyone did. Everyone did. And yet many people whose ancestors were once slaves, more or less, depending on where the heck they ended up probably assimilating into said culture, whether it be Islam or Islam is a religion, I know, but or whether, but religion is a part of a culture. Okay, religion makes up a culture. That's okay, but whether it be Islam or I don't know, like some Christian country or somewhere around the world, or the point is, it's just ignorant to say, man. Let's continue.
And in these port towns, Ibn Battuta first saw societies where Muslims were the minority, where the elites and rulers didn't share a religious tie to the majority of their populations. But these were no frontier ports. They were cities, whose rulers lived in palaces with indoor plumbing. Elites dressed in silk and ate off porcelain, both imports from China. He saw great mosques and mansions carved from coral. Mixed cultures formed from Islam's economic dominance of the maritime networks. But again, his time was running short, the monsoon winds changing and blowing back north. So he hopped on a ship back to the Arabian Peninsula, where he could finally travel on to India. But when he arrived on the southern coast of Arabia, he realized it would be cool to see the Gulf of Oman. Though that was a bit of a disaster. Their guide tried to rob and murder him, and Ibn Battuta only escaped after fending the man off with a spear. He reached the Gulf dehydrated, half dead from illness, and feet bleeding from the trip.
Oh!
And, you know, probably
that hurt my feet.
that now it was really time to head to Delhi. You know, become established. But first, a side trip. Back to Mecca for the Hajj for a third time. After another year of study and rest, Ibn Battuta was finally ready for India. For real this time. He'd buffed his resume with qualifications, could tell stories of far-flung places, and had built up a tidy profit in gifts. But the trip itself would be treacherous, and to get there, he needed a guide. And he couldn't find one. Okay, no problem, because everyone knew that the Turkish Silk Road caravans linked Anatolia with India, and if you joined them, you'd get there eventually. Sure, there were more direct routes, but he'd seen that stuff already. He went to Cairo and met up with a traveling buddy. And reunited, the two stepped onto a Genoese galley and made for Anatolia. And in this land, whose urban centers contained neighborhoods of minority Christians, Jews, and Greeks, and where nomadic herders traveled the wild hillsides, they gave him a warm welcome. "This country is one of the finest in the world," he wrote. "In it, God has brought together the good things dispersed throughout other lands. Its people are the most comely of men, the cleanest in their dress, the most delicious in their food, and the kindliest folk in creation. Wherever we stopped in this land, whether it a hospice or a private house, our neighbors came to ask after our needs. When we left, they bade us farewell as though they were our relatives."
Wow, that's the first time I've heard anything good about freaking Anatolia and people who live in Anatolia. Actually, no. Considering how important Anatolia is throughout history, this is the first time I've heard anything about people living in Anatolia.
He also saw one city execute people by firing them off a cliff with a catapult, but overall, the people were really nice. Interesting.
What in...
He found differences in their religious practice. Though observant Muslims, they chewed intoxicating drugs and did not veil women. In fact, Turkish society surprised him when he found out how high a status women had. Now further weighed down with Turkish gifts, he pushed north toward the Silk Road, down the rapids of swollen rivers, nearly freezing to death in the wilderness, avoiding bandits and thieves. But he made it to the Black Sea and boarded a ship for an even stranger place, one of nomads and horsemen. The land of the Golden
War. I knew it. I knew it was gonna be freaking. I knew it was gonna be around the area of Kiev, Rus.
But first, a side trip. Special thanks to
this man loves to go on his freaking side trips, man. Honestly, though, I like it very a lot. This is actually quite good. This is very, very intriguing. I'm honestly quite glad I decided to listen to that person who suggested me to react to this series, because this is actually super interesting. Anyways, you made it here. If you made it all the way here, you know, just subscribe. Go check out my other reactions if you like what I have to say in my videos, man. And like the video, because, you know, I need my videos to stay on the YouTube algorithm. If you got any suggestions for me, go comment down below. Thank you for watching and goodbye.